and that she had some control over the game through these special codes. These codes were needed to win a lottery to get back into the real world. She also believed that she controlled what the TV said to her and that people were reading her mind. This is called thought broadcasting. It was already clear to me that Isabella had schizophrenia. She was a college student and said it was very difficult because when people were reading her mind at school, she would be embarrassed because sometimes she imagined that some people looked like naked. She believed that they could read her mind, so she would turn red and get very embarrassed in school. Her internal thoughts so consumed her, she had intense emotional reactions like crying, and the people around her wouldn't know why she would be crying or what was going on. In a nutshell, Isabella thought life was a game run by aliens. The aliens controlled every aspect of the game, and unless you knew special codes to enter the lottery, you could not get out of the game. And in this alien world, she had to save her brothers and sisters because they were in danger. She would spend all day thinking about this. It consumed every moment of her life. Isabella was obsessed with this alien world. She believed that everything in the real world was related to the game world. But if she didn't know the codes to the alien-run game world, she wouldn't survive. So she always felt that her family was in danger. She was committed to saving her brothers and sisters from this alien world. She had a big family, 4 sisters and 2 brothers. She had to pay very particular attention to them, because if she didn't, they would get sucked into the game world, and then they'd be controlled by aliens and never get out. She told me that for her last birthday, all of her siblings got together and gave her a necklace as a birthday gift. When she opened it, an alien immediately told her that she couldn't accept it, that accepting the necklace would violate the rules of the game, and the punishment for the violation would be the death of one sibling. This caused a lot of stress and consumed a lot of time. Because she spent all day thinking about this, she couldn't get anything else done. She was originally from Panama, and she was placed in a hospital there in 2014. They had put her on mirtazapine 15 milligrams at bedtime, olanzapine 15 milligrams at bedtime, duloxetine at bedtime, and topramate 50 milligrams twice a day. She had been on that for a year, but clearly she was still stuck in the delusional system of this alien world, still having thought broadcasting and thought insurrection, which was alien thoughts being put in her brain. She would get caught talking to the alien world to an outsider. This gave the impression that she was talking to herself, which in reality she was, but in her mind she was talking to the aliens in their world. In the meantime, her ability to think clearly and make decisions was severely impaired. Because she was living in this game world run by the aliens, she was reacting to that world and not the real world. The aliens were also behind something referred to experiences of influence, where they were controlling everything she did. So for no rational reason, she would do what would be considered as strange and bizarre in the real world. But in her world, the alien world, those things made total sense. The aliens would tell her to take all the gold jewelry in the house and put it in one box. So she would sort the jewelry and do that. The aliens would tell her to cut all the curtains in half because they wanted light, so she would cut the curtains in the entire house. She was told to remove all the flower pots from outside and put them in the living room. She was told to take all the books in the house and put them in the trunk of her car. Because there were bad codes in the book, she was told to smash the glass in every picture frame. She obeyed every order because the aliens told her if she didn't, family members would die. Generally speaking, a person with schizophrenia thinks they are fine. Their insight is totally impaired. They will do and say things that others think of as strange, but they make as much sense to them as our thoughts do to us. The delusional system of the voices, the game, the codes, the lottery, and the aliens and their commands to Isabella, they're all real. They make perfect sense. Talking to people in the alien world all day and negotiating with them so they would not hurt her family caused a huge amount of anxiety because she was afraid the aliens would kill her family if she did not get the right code or she did not follow her commands properly. The family was beside themselves because living with her was very unpredictable. They They never knew what she was going to do, so everyone was very anxious around her. She was hell-bent to follow the aliens' commands to save her family. So she had a moral system, but the psychosis that had taken over her everyday actions. This truly frightened her family. The meds she was put on in the Panama hospital obviously weren't working, and Isabella was complaining about weight gain from them. She reported that she had been 110 pounds, but that she had put on 30 pounds since starting them a year prior. The mirtazapine and the olanzapine were known to put on weight, but Diplomat helps with weight loss, but the problem with that is that it causes mental slowing. The duloxetine was a good choice of antidepressant, but it wasn't working for her. The weight gain was an issue. Coupled by the lack of efficacy of her meds, I felt like it may be time to make some changes in her med regime. She had brought some records from her primary care and included some recent labs. They were not normal. Her cholesterol was high, as was her blood sugar. In fact, she was pre-diabetic. I explained to Isabella and her siblings that we were going to stop the mirtazapine and the olanzapine because they were putting on weight, and we were going to stop the Diplomat because it was making her mentally slow. I also increased the antidepressant duloxetine and added the antipsychotic lurasidone. I explained that it would be very important that she take omega-3s, folate, and B12. I also told her to exercise daily, maybe yoga or walking, just something to move her body. I gave her my nutritional plan, which was to avoid sugar, white flour, red meat, dairy, and processed food, and to eat fresh fruits, vegetables, lean meat, chicken, mackerel, tuna, olive oil, nuts, eggs, and things high in omega-3s. I noted how patient Petra and Matilda were with Isabella, and they never yelled at her despite the odd things she did. They were always very nice, they were encouraging, and they were not critical or demanding. I think they were one of the most supportive families I had ever seen. They were the role model of a good family unit. They all worked together to help her. When she was doing things that were dangerous, they would stop her, but they would listen to what she was saying. They never devalued her, and she was a respected member of the family. They encouraged her to do positive things in her life, like take her medicines and go to school. Rather than yell, "Don't do that," they would say, "That's probably not a good choice." Isabella was in a fight to control her mind, but she certainly wasn't fighting alone. It was very encouraging to see. Isabella came back in a week later, once again with Petra and Matilda. She was still living with the aliens. She was still fearful that they were going to hurt her family. She was still getting command hallucinations with the voices telling her to do things. She still had the voices telling her she was gay and that she needed to die. She was still searching for the special codes to enter the lottery to save her family. She was having a lot of anxiety from the delusions, but she was having trouble sleeping. Her family had helped implement the med changes. They were exercising with her and making sure she ate correctly. Given that, she was still controlled by her delusions. I increased her lurasidone and added quetiapine 50 milligrams at bedtime for sleep and clonazepam for anxiety. I did everything with an eye toward improving her mood and stopping the delusional system and the psychosis without weight gain or drugged appearance. There are two sides to the schizophrenia picture, the positive symptoms and the negative symptoms. The positive symptoms include the voices, the delusions, the disorganized speech, and disorganized behavior. The negative symptoms include apathy, blunt affect, trouble concentrating, and difficulty completing tasks. Both sides must be treated, which is what makes it tricky. The positive symptoms are easy to treat, but the negative symptoms seem to linger longer. The apathy, the blunt affect, and the inability to complete tasks, they're more difficult to treat. Often those negative symptoms cause people with schizophrenia to be passive. They are followers who are rarely assertive enough to take initiative to get things done. Isabella was still exhibiting both positive and negative symptoms at this point, but her new med regime really hadn't had a fair shot to work yet. I suggested we meet again in 2 weeks. That should give the meds a chance to work. I told them to call my office at any time if they needed me sooner. I saw Isabella back 2 weeks later, again with Petra and Matilda, all three smiling, which is always a good sign. Isabella said that the anxiety was much better and that the hallucinations had stopped. Thank you, lorazepam. She was no longer hearing voices. The command hallucinations were gone, With the quetiapine, she was sleeping, but she said it was hit or miss, so I increased that. However, even with all this progress, she was still having delusions. Now she believed that her grandmother was living inside her. So now they were both living in the alien's game world, and unless she got the right code for the lottery, she could not get her grandmother out of her psyche or out of her thoughts. She said at one point she felt that God was living inside her. She also reported that she started getting these paranoid thoughts that people were following her, and she believed that Donald Trump was inside her. These are called ideas of reference and are a type of delusion. When she saw events on the TV, she thought they were about her. At times, she would say that she had written the information that would show on the TV, or that the people on the TV were there for her. So the auditory command hallucinations had subsided. But the ideas of reference continued. With the meds changed, I suggested that we follow up in 2 weeks again. She came back in again with Petra and Matilda. Matilda said that Isabella was no longer paranoid about people following her, that she was making more sense when she spoke, and that she was no longer doing strange things around the house. That told me that the disorganized speech and disorganized behavior, those positive symptoms of schizophrenia, had subsided. I told him that I thought we were on the right track, but we hadn't yet reached our destination, so we needed to continue with the meds as they were for now. She still had the TV delusions, the ideas of reference, but she told me that she had just started back to college, taking 2 courses. I reminded her that even though she was going to school, that she needed to make time to exercise daily. And I reinforced the importance of diet and the supplements I had recommended. They all expressed their understanding, and I told them how amazed I was with their constant support. When one of her siblings said they would make sure she took her meds, ate properly, and exercised, I knew that would follow through. I knew that they would follow through. It was great to see. Isabella had a large family, and they created a wonderful space for her, almost a therapeutic community, to support her and give her the best chance to get better. Isabella was only comfortable with her family, and when she was exposed to other people, her anxiety would skyrocket and other symptoms would get worse as well. Isabella came back about a month later, and she looked so much better. Her face was more animated, she was more organized, and she related to me. She was no longer internally distracted like she was while living in her own little world of aliens and codes. I was feeling much better about how things were going. She was now taking these 2 classes in school, but I still felt that people would read her mind and that they know what she was thinking. Though broadcasting strikes again, her anxiety was gone, but she did not mention that she was very sleepy during the day, so the medicines she was taking were a touch too much, so I backed the quetiapine down because that was the culprit making her sleepy. I kept the lurazidone the same. I educated them on these drugs that were used for psychosis. The lurazidone and the quetiapine have a very small risk of 0.14% a year of causing a permanent tic called tardive dyskinesia. They also may increase the risk of diabetics or stroke, and she was eating less and she was losing weight, which was great. Her exercise plan was helping combat any depression or anxiety that might crop up. At this point, the hallucinations were virtually gone and the delusions were minimal. She was sleeping better. I told them to keep up the great work and that I'd see them next time. A month later, Isabella looked like she was doing well. She lost some weight and her face was more defined, less puffy. She had new labs from her primary care physician. Both her cholesterol and blood sugar were down and normalized. She was no longer pre-diabetic. She said she was making A's in both classes, but she still felt like people at school would read her mind. Now that we've decreased the quetiapine, she's having trouble sleeping at night. So she's sleeping during the day more often. I told her that we could go back up on the quetiapine to make her sleep at night, and she agreed. By this effect, I was a little concerned that the anxiety might creep back, so I told her to continue her clonazepam for that, and that would also help her sleep as well. I suggested we follow up in 2 months next time, and that I was always available by phone. When Isabella came back 2 months later, I really noticed a dramatic weight loss, at least 20 pounds. She said that there were no more voices and that for the most part, people were no longer reading her mind. that it happened once in a while, but not constantly like it was before. She said she was feeling more like herself and that the crying spell she had been having had stopped. Her brother Pietro and sister Matilda both said that she is far better than she has ever been, that the whole family was thrilled with all the positive changes. She said she was considering adding at least one more class the following semester. At this, Pietro and Matilda seemed concerned. They asked my opinion on it, and I said that her initiative was a good sign and that I didn't have a problem with adding courses as long as they didn't have a negative effect on her status, didn't cause undue anxiety, and didn't prevent her from exercising. Everyone nodded, and I said I'd see her back in 2 months. Pardon me. 2 months later, Isabel came in for follow-up. She said that she's drowsy all day long and the clonazepam was drugging her. She actually looked a little medicated. Despite that, she looked much better, and at this point, there were no more delusions and she was much more organized, more appropriate. She said that people could no longer read her mind anymore, and she is now taking 4 classes. During her psychotic period, I never realized how capable and intelligent she was. It turns out that in her family of 6 siblings, everyone agreed that Isabella was the smartest one, and everyone admired her for that. She was the only one going to college, and according to Pietro and Matilda, she was the only one truly capable of doing so. She was taking 4 classes and had A's in all of them. When I saw her 2 months later, she was more appropriate and she was smiling. I asked her what happened to the aliens. She smiled and she said they must have gotten back in their spaceship and flown home because they were long gone. She had left her delusional world, her alternate reality, hopefully for good, and she was now truly in reality. Now I did some reality testing where I asked her about these aliens and the codes and the lottery, the threats the aliens were making, and how the aliens were directing the game and her behavior. I was pleased when she said, no, not happening anymore. And then we talked about what classes to take, what she wanted to major in, and what would be hard, what would be easier. She was going to be taking a full load, and we were strategizing about how to optimize school and maybe even get a part-time job. We were 8 months into this odyssey, and Isabella was very functional now. Her stress levels still concerned me, but I trusted her to speak up if it all became too much. It was hard to reconcile this Isabella with the one that first walked into my office 8 months before. It was incredible that someone who was so psychotic was now getting straight A's, but she was. The next visit 2 months later, Isabella came in and said that it was 10 months exactly from the day she'd had her first appointment with me. She had come in with just her sister Matilda because Pietro was ill. She said that she was feeling good, her thoughts were clear, but her weight was still a problem. She said she had initially lost 17 pounds, but now she was gaining again. The quetiapine was making her eat more, so I stopped that. I also added trazodone as an antidepressant and for sleep. I explained to Isabella that I was trying to optimize drugs that wouldn't make her drowsy and wouldn't put on weight. I explained the med changes and we agreed to meet 2 months later. She made an emergency appointment for about a week later. She came in and said, oh boy, I have a problem. I cringed as I asked what the problem was. She told me that she was getting milk in her breast. This was a problem, a big one. This is called galactorrhea, and it's a side effect of lorazepam. Sometimes it raises prolactin levels. Prolactin tells the body to produce milk. I ordered a prolactin level and hers was high, very high. If the lorazepam weren't so vital to controlling her psychosis, I would have immediately taken her off of it, but I just felt she had to stay on it. So I made the decision to lower it and cross our fingers. She said she was willing to put up with a little if she had to. I briefly considered switching to another drug, but things were going so well. So I told her that I thought we had to try to work with this. When she agreed, I told her how it went for a couple of months. When she came back, She said that the milk production had slowed and that she was no longer depressed. She said she felt good. She definitely looked like she was doing well. Given she wasn't depressed, I decided that we could try to taper off the duloxetine over the 2-week schedule and then stop it. I suggested then that we meet in 3 months. When Isabella returned, she said the delusions were gone. She was having none of the negative symptoms. Her affect was no longer flat. She was no longer apathetic, and she was no longer depressed. She was still in school and was on track to get her associate's degree. The best news was that lowering that lorazepam worked. She was no longer having milk production. When we met next, Isabella told me that she was writing a romance novel. She was definitely taking initiative, and I was glad to see that. She asked if she could try to stop the trazodone because she felt like she didn't need it for sleep anymore. Since she wasn't depressed, I said that was fine by me, and I told her good luck with her book and that I'd see her in 2 months. When I next saw Isabella, she said she was getting some period of nausea when she took the lorazepam. I told her to buy papaya enzymes and to chew 4 of them. The papaya enzymes would settle her stomach. There were no delusions, no issues with aliens, no problems with voices, and no problems with hallucinations or disorganized behavior, like the gold jewelry or the curtains. She was still keeping the book in the trunk of her car. For some reason, she justified that it was okay with that if the family was, as long as they stopped there. When Isabella came next, we were now about 18 months on. It was time to get some blood chemicals. Isabella said things were great, that she was finishing her final semester to get her AA degree, and that she had decided she wanted to be a therapist. Next visit, Isabella brought her sister Matilda with her. I told them that the labs came back normal. She was now just on lorazepam. She had a bomb to drop. She said that she was under a lot of stress from school. She was getting overwhelmed, and the symptoms were coming back. This is now 20 months in. I was blown away. She said she was getting more confused. She was tearful, and she was getting weird dreams. She was afraid that other people would read her mind again. She was getting nervous, thinking that people were putting thoughts in her head. This is what I'd been afraid of. The stressors of school had caused a decompensation. She was on a full load of difficult classes, and she was finishing her AA degree. I knew we needed to nip this in the bud and go back on the lorazepam, even though I knew going back up may cause milk production in her breasts again. The galactorrhea, I also told her to back off the stressors, that she was doing too much. It wasn't working. She had apparently started getting involved in some groups at school. I suspected that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I strongly suggested that she back away from these groups and committees she was involved in. She agreed to consider it. Upon her return, it sounded like the increase in the lorazepam worked. Isabella was more organized and more appropriate. She had bowed out of 3 of her 4 groups she'd been in, and that had decreased her stress level. She had joined them in an effort to make more friends. I told her to make friends, but don't get stressed out about it. Next time, Isabella came in with Pietro and Matilda. Isabella had completed her AA degree. That made her happy, but she said that, aside from that, she was actually feeling sad and depressed. She said there was no hallucinations, no delusions, no aliens. She did not think people would read her thoughts, and she did not think the TV was talking about her. At this point, I wanted to continue her on the lorazepam, but added a new medicine, bupropion, to help with depression, lose weight, and give her energy. Her sister and brother agreed with her and said that depression was pretty bad from their point of view. I gave her the script for the bupropion and told her to follow up. The following visit, the bupropion had worked. Things seemed steady. Isabella was not having delusions or hallucinations, is no longer depressed, and is sleeping well. Her family was still very supportive, and Isabella was in school again. She had joined a study group where she was very involved. She was handling social situations better than ever before. She was making friends, still exercising, and still watching her diet. She was definitely losing weight and was probably the thinnest I'd ever seen her. I cautioned her to not overextend herself. She understood what would happen if she did, so she was on board. I told her that we could move follow-up to 6 months. At this point, she was able to reflect. She couldn't believe the scope of what she'd gone through, how bad it had really been. She said it was best when she said I was living a nightmare. She continued, I thought all those things were so real, and they weren't real at all. And I was doing all these crazy things. I was lost for years and I didn't know what I was doing. Those things were so real, they scared me. I almost killed myself and scared me so much. And all the things I did to upset my family, I can't believe they stood by me. They're so supportive, I'm so grateful. I wouldn't have gotten through this without them, or without you, so thank you. Hallelujah. Isabella had reached the point where she suddenly had the insight to reflect back, but it was very painful, so I told her, let's just look forward. Let's just be in the here and now, and let's never have these conversations about how bad it was, I said. We can talk about it if you really want to, but I don't want you to live in the past. Let's just focus on what you need to do to make things better today, because you may trigger a bad reaction. When she asked what kind of reaction, I explained a phenomenon called psychotic recall, which means that when you're psychotic, your brain interprets the world in a psychotic way. Your brain processes things in a psychotic way, so you will remember things from that time in a psychotic way. All the information and everything taken in during that time is psychotic, I told her. Now you're no longer in that psychosis, in that alternate reality, but when you think about that time, the thoughts you're remembering are psychotic, and they are going to make you very depressed. They are very painful and can actually be very damaging. So I don't want you going back there and thinking these thoughts that were not real. The aliens world, the game world, the codes, they were not real. But when you went through it, it was real. So now, when you have memories of it, you have these altered memories. It is very painful to recall psychotic thoughts, so you end up getting depressed. Now that she understood the concept of a psychotic recall, she agreed that she would avoid remembering that time. She would move forward, stick with school, a job, family, friends, and healthy pursuits, including her diet and exercise. I continued to follow her, and she continues to do well. Isabella lived in a world with aliens, but she's back on Earth now.